There's a very specific kind of loneliness, one that doesn't happen when you're alone in a dark room, but rather when you're lying next to someone. It's a loneliness that screams loudest at the exact moment when, theoretically, two human beings should be most connected. I'm talking about that moment. Immediately after sex, you look to the side. His breathing has already changed. He's already turned away, or perhaps he's already picked up his phone with that ice-cold indifference that cuts to the soul. His body is still warm next to yours, but you feel a chill coming from within. There was no exchange. There was an act. There was friction. There was biology. There might have even been an impressive technical performance, but there was no you. You feel drained, not relaxed. You feel used, not loved. And the question that begins to eat at your mind in the following hours, as you try to rationalize what just happened, is devastating. Am I just a body? Am I just a convenience? Many intelligent, capable, and deep women find themselves trapped in this dynamic. They try to compensate for the lack of emotional connection with hypersexuality, trying to win the narcissist's heart through physical pleasure, believing that if they are good enough, attractive enough, available enough, the key to intimacy will finally turn, but it never turns. Because what is happening there isn't a communication breakdown, nor a matter of libido. What you are experiencing is systematic dehumanization. In this video, we are going to go deep into the narcissistic psyche to understand what really happens behind closed doors. We'll understand why sex with a narcissist often makes you feel more like an object on a shelf than a life partner. You will understand that this feeling of being an object isn't your paranoia. It's his design. My name is Lauren Mitchell. My purpose with this channel is to show you that the problem was never you, and more importantly, that you are not alone. If this video touches your heart, I invite you to check out the link in the description. You'll find an ebook created with great care to help you reframe what you've lived through, strengthen your self-esteem, and reclaim the self that was stolen from you. Let's anchor this in the reality of your daily life, in those situations you've lived through, and perhaps never been able to put into words. The sexual dynamic with a narcissistic person usually oscillates between two disturbing extremes: an award-worthy performance or the coldness of a medical procedure. And what connects these two extremes is the absolute absence of a gaze. Think about the last time you were intimate. Was he looking into your eyes, seeking your reaction, connecting with your emotion? Or was he focused on his own performance, his own pleasure, or perhaps even looking at himself in the mirror? Many victims report that, during the act, they feel they could be replaced by anyone else, or even a mannequin, and the result would be the same. The narcissist doesn't make love with you. He performs sex at you. There is a brutal difference in those prepositions. When he has sex at you, your body becomes a territory to be conquered, used, and then cast aside. You realize that for him, sex isn't a bridge to intimacy, but a release of tension or a validation of power. And here is where the mental confusion that paralyzes so many women sets in. Because in the beginning, during the love-bombing phase, the sex seemed magical. It seemed intense, transcendental. He seemed obsessed with every inch of your skin. But if you look through the lens of behavioral analysis we use here, you'll realize that even back then, the intensity wasn't about you. It was about mirroring. He was consuming your adoration of him. He was addicted to the way you looked at him, not to who you were. Now, in the devaluation phase, that mask falls. Sex becomes transactional. He might demand sex as payment for having been good, meaning doing the bare minimum, or he might punish you with a sex strike when you displease him. You begin to notice cruel patterns. He seeks you out when he needs validation, when he's had a bad day at work, or when he wants to prove he still has it. But if you need affection, a shoulder to lean on, or physical connection to feel safe, he withdraws. He rejects. He says you're too needy, clingy, or obsessive. This selective rejection is calculated. Goal is to make you feel that your desire is something dirty, something wrong, while his desire is a divine order that must be obeyed immediately. You begin to dissociate. During the act, your mind wanders. You leave your own body because it's too painful to be present in such an intimate moment. With someone who is so distant, you feel like an inflatable doll, useful for a few minutes, then deflated and tucked away in the dark drawer of indifference until he feels like playing again. And this feeling of objectification is not an accidental side effect. It is the fundamental structure of how the narcissist relates to the world. To understand why you feel like an object, we need to understand how the narcissist's mind processes the existence of other people. And here we enter our first psychological pillar, objectification as a defense mechanism. For a healthy person, sexual intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires you to let your guard down, to show your imperfections, to merge with the other. For a narcissist, vulnerability is equivalent to death. It is an existential threat. If he allows himself to truly connect with you, he will have to face his own shame, his own flaws, and the fear of being rejected. So what does he do? He converts you. In his mind, you cease to be a subject, a person with feelings, needs, a history, and a soul, and you become an object. An object doesn't judge. An object doesn't abandon. An object doesn't have needs that compete with his. An object has a function. Think about your toaster. You don't ask the toaster how its day was. You don't worry if it's tired. You expect that when you press a button, it fulfills its function. If it doesn't, you get annoyed, you hit it, you replace it. This is exactly how the narcissist sees a sexual partner. You become a supply dispenser. The supply might be the physical orgasm, but frequently it's something more subtle. It's the sense of power, of control, of being desired. When he objectifies you, he protects himself. He doesn't need to have empathy for an object. If you cry after sex, he gets irritated, not concerned. Why? Because the toaster is making noise when it should be silent. Your crying is a malfunction of the object, not an expression of human pain that requires comfort. That's why the complaints you make about a lack of affection, lack of foreplay, or lack of post-sex conversation are never heard. To him, these demands are like your coffee maker demanding a day off. It sounds absurd to him. I gave you what you wanted, sex presence. Why are you complaining? He doesn't understand emotional nourishment because he operates on the logic of utility. This objectification also explains the visual and often pornographic nature of narcissistic sexuality. The focus is on aesthetics, on positions, on what can be seen and consumed, not on what is felt. He may want you to wear certain clothes, act a certain way, or accept practices that make you uncomfortable, not because it increases connection, but because it improves the scene he is directing in his own head. You are a prop in the movie where he is the protagonist, the director, and the only spectator. And the tragedy is that you strive to be the best prop possible, thinking that if you're perfect, he'll promote you to co-star. But his script has no room for two protagonists. Deepening our analysis, we reach the second pillar, the micromanagement of pleasure and somatic control. Here, sex stops being just a search for relief and becomes a political weapon within the relationship. The narcissist is addicted to control. He needs to regulate the environment and the people around him to keep his inflated false self intact. And there is no tool of control more powerful than access to intimacy and pleasure. In this pillar, we see two main tactics operating simultaneously: deprivation and coercion. First, deprivation. The narcissist quickly realizes that sex is important to you, that it's through sex that you feel the connection and the security of the bond. So, what does he do? He starts to ration it. He withdraws sex or makes it cold and mechanical whenever you show independence, or when you criticize him, or simply to make you insecure. He creates an artificial scarcity. By denying you intimacy, he makes you hungry, and a hungry person will accept any crumb. You find yourself accepting quick sex, no kissing, no affection, just because you are desperate for any physical contact that confirms he still wants you. He trains you, like Pavlov trained his dogs, to associate good behavior, submission, with a sexual reward. On the other hand, there is subtle coercion, duty sex. He makes you feel it's your obligation to satisfy him. If you say, no, he pouts. He gets aggressive. He threatens to look elsewhere. Or he accuses you of not loving him. You're rejecting me, he says, flipping the guilt. You end up giving in, not out of desire, but to avoid a war, to keep the peace. This is devastating to the female psyche. When you have sex to keep the peace, you are teaching your body that your boundaries don't matter. You are violating yourself in the name of maintaining the relationship. The narcissist also uses sex to regulate your self-esteem. He may make subtle comments about your body, compare you to ex-girlfriends or actresses, or show exaggerated enthusiasm for other women in front of you, only to seek you out in bed later. This creates cognitive dissonance. He makes you feel ugly and inadequate during the day, but uses you at night. This keeps you in a state of perverse gratitude. You become grateful that he still wants you, despite all the flaws he pointed out. He micromanages your pleasure. Often your pleasure is seen as a threat or a competition. If you take too long to get there, he gets impatient. If you are too vocal, he critiques. Or conversely, he becomes obsessed with giving you pleasure. Not so you feel good, but to prove to himself that he is the best lover you've ever had. Your orgasm becomes his trophy, not your experience. Once again, it's about him, not about you. Now let's go to the deepest and most disturbing layer of this dynamic, the concept that ties it all together and that once you understand it, flips the switch completely. We are talking about narcissistic solipsism. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. For the pathological narcissist, this is a psychological reality. On a very deep level, he cannot conceive that other people are separate entities with rich, autonomous internal lives. To him, people are extensions of himself, or NPCs, non-playable characters, in his video game. This means that when you are in bed having sex, in his head, he is alone. This may sound terrifying, but it explains everything. It explains the blank stare. It explains the lack of empathy. It explains why he can hurt you physically without noticing, or ignore your request to stop or go slower. He is not interacting with another consciousness. He is interacting with a projection. He is having an autoerotic experience, using your body as a facilitator. It is a form of assisted masturbation. Your physical presence is necessary, but your psychological presence is a nuisance. If you start talking too much about your feelings or demand real connection, you break character. You interrupt his fantasy. This is why often the narcissist closes his eyes or avoids direct eye contact during moments of climax. He doesn't want to see you. He wants to see the fantasy he projected onto you. This also explains the ease with which they cheat. To us, cheating is the breaking of a sacred pact between two souls. For the solipsistic narcissist, switching sexual partners is like switching cars or brands of cereal. If the current object isn't providing adequate supply, or has become boring and defective, meaning it started having human demands, he looks for another newer, shinier object. There is no guilt, because there is no recognition of the other's humanity. You don't feel guilty about replacing a burnt-out light bulb. He doesn't feel guilty about replacing you. This is the painful but necessary revelation. The intimacy you desperately sought was never available, not because you failed to extract it, but because the well was dry from the start. You were trying to get blood from a stone. You were trying to dance a tango with someone who can only hear their own voice. Sex without love, with a narcissist, isn't just a bad phase. It is the only modality of sex he is capable of offering. Because for there to love, there needs to be an other. And in the narcissist's world, there is only one. Take a deep breath now. I know reading this might have felt like a punch to the stomach. Recognizing that you were used as an object, that your intimacy was converted into a transaction, and that your vulnerability was exploited, hurts. It hurts deep. But this pain is the pain of healing. It is the pain of a bone being set back into place. Understanding these three pillars, objectification, control, and solipsism, gives you something he tried to take away, the truth. You now know that his coldness wasn't because you weren't attractive enough. You know that the lack of connection wasn't because you didn't try hard enough in bed. You know that the loneliness you felt with him wasn't a flaw in you, but the correct perception of reality. You were emotionally alone because he was never truly there. Your body is not a service dispenser. Your sexuality is not a currency to buy affection. Your pleasure is not a trophy for anyone's ego. Liberation begins when you stop using sex to try to fix the relationship or to try to be seen. You take back ownership of your body. You establish non-negotiable boundaries. And above all, you understand that you deserve a touch that comes with a soul. You deserve to be looked in the eye by someone who sees the immensity that exists within you, and not just a mirror for themselves. You are not an object. You are the subject of your own story. And now that you've decoded the game, you are free to leave the board. Feel free to leave your story, your vent, or even a suggestion for the next video's theme in the comments below. Access the link in the description to check out my ebook and the benefits of being a channel member. Click on the suggested video on the screen to stay with me, and remember, you are light. Never forget to shine.